A 5-year-old Minnesota girl was abducted in August 2016, and the perpetrator turned out to be someone close to home. On August 20th, 2016, 5-year-old Alayna Ertl's parents, Matt and Kaylee Ertl, put her to bed at 2 a.m. in their home in Watkins, Minnesota. The Ertls had a camping trip planned that day. The camper was packed, and Alayna was excited to go. Matt then went downstairs to talk with his friend, Zachary Todd Anderson. They played softball, and Zach is spending the night. 6 hours later, at 8 a.m., they discovered that Alayna is missing, as well as 25-year-old Zach and Matt's truck. They immediately notified the authorities. The detective's suspicion was that Anderson drove Alayna away from her home in her father's truck. Matt's cell phone was still in the car. Local law enforcement searched the neighborhood and contacted the family's cell phone provider in an attempt to locate Anderson and Alayna. The Ertls did not believe that Anderson would do anything bad, and they looked around town for the truck. Maybe there was a reason, an explanation for why Anderson would have taken Alayna. They were in denial. Kaylee said, "When you believe that someone is your friend, you do not even think about situations like this being bad." After the officials issued an Amber Alert and Matt's phone was pinged, Anderson's father called the sheriff's office, saying he believed his son was the subject of the statewide Amber Alert. The stolen vehicle was then found at a rural cabin in Browerville, owned by Anderson's grandfather. Deputies who entered the cabin found a shotgun on the kitchen table with ammunition spilled about and a note with blood on the upper corner. There were no people in the cabin, but the police dogs found Anderson in a wooded area around a quarter of a mile away. He did not attempt to flee or resist arrest. He gave the police information that led to the discovery of Alayna's remains in a swampy wooded area a few hundred yards from the cabin. According to the medical examiner's autopsy released by the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, Alayna lost her life due to strangulation. There was evidence that she was hit on the head and assaulted. Meeker County Sheriff Brian Cruz said, "We did everything we could today to try to find her safely, and obviously that did not happen. And I know that does not compare to what the family is going through, but we felt we did everything we possibly could." Anderson was a family friend and co-worker of Alayna's father, who had stayed the night at the Ertl household sometimes. In May 2006, when Anderson was 15 years old, he lived in a townhouse with his mother in Monticello, Minnesota. In the summer of 2006, one of Anderson's neighbors reported to the authorities that he was leaving love notes on her car. They were stated to include compliments on the woman's appearance and a phone number to call if she was interested in dating him. Anderson then went to the neighbor's home and demanded that the woman sleep with him, and after being repeatedly denied, he fled once the woman's boyfriend went to the door. The following year, in June 2007, Anderson broke into the woman's home by removing a window screen and then stole the woman's cell phone. As a result, he was charged with first-degree burglary and theft, and later pled guilty to third-degree burglary with a sentence of mandatory community service. In March 2018, Anderson pleaded guilty. During the whole court process, he said nothing and continued to deny what he did. In statements made in court to Judge Jana Austad before Anderson was sentenced, Alayna's family and friends described how Anderson's actions that day affected their lives and continue to affect them every day. Marywell, Alayna's grandmother, said, "I felt numb, paralyzed by grief and pain. The loss is beyond words." In the fall of 2016, Alayna was supposed to go to her first day of kindergarten, and her outfit had already been chosen. Kaylee, Alayna's mother, said, "Instead, those clothes are still on the hangers, and those boots are now with her in heaven." Several people described to the judge how Anderson's actions caused them to distrust people daily. They struggled to let people into their homes. They struggled to even want to spend time with friends. Kaylee said that they struggle to allow their other children to have sleepovers or hang out with friends when they are not around. She added, "Zach Anderson had no right to decide Alayna's life was going to end. Alayna's rights were never asked of her, and Zach Anderson took all her rights. Before the sentencing, Judge Austad addressed Anderson. "I do not want to lose sight of the fact that you are a human being. Certainly, the act is monstrous. It is beyond human understanding." Anderson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kayla said, "Our love for Alayna is stronger than he is. Zach Anderson has lost. Alayna will forever live in our hearts and memories." On September 10th, 2023, as part of a 2-year collaboration between various businesses, a life-size statue of Alayna Ertl was erected in McCarthy Park in Watkins, Minnesota. In July 2016, a man went on a 3-day crime spree in Oregon and California, altering his victims and their families' lives. Early on the morning of July 24th, 2016, 23-year-old Bend, Oregon resident Kaylee Sawyer was kidnapped and slain. An autopsy showed that she lost her life from blunt force trauma and that she fought back. The following day, on July 25th, a 19-year-old woman, Andrea Elizabeth Mace, was carjacked and kidnapped at gunpoint in Salem, Oregon. The perpetrator told her that he was a police officer and showed her news reports about what he had done to Kaylee Sawyer. He then forced her to travel with him to California. Along the way, he decided to stop at a hotel in Cottage Grove, Oregon. Inside the hotel room, he handcuffed Andrea, forced her to take sleeping pills, and made a series of physical advances leading her to believe he might assault her. A short while later, after receiving a phone call and growing concerned that law enforcement was nearing his location, they left the hotel and continued traveling toward California. At some point during the drive, the perpetrator sought to change vehicles to avoid detection and stopped at 2 rest areas looking for another vehicle to steal. In the early morning hours on July 26th, they stopped at a motel in Yreka, California, where he spotted an elderly man near his vehicle. He parked, grabbed Andrea by the hand, and approached the man. With his gun visible, he told the man that he needed his vehicle. When the man would not comply, he shot him in the abdomen. At this point, Andrea pleaded with him to let her go, but he again grabbed her hand and forced her to flee with him by foot to a nearby gas station. At the gas station, he found his next victims, 2 young men and their elderly grandmother sitting inside a vehicle. After threatening to shoot them, he entered their vehicle with Andrea and forced them to drive off. During the drive, he confessed to his victims that he had an urge to end lives and had already slain a young woman in Bend and shot a man in Yreka. He eventually dropped his 3 California victims on the side of the road, again threatening to take their lives, and continued driving southbound with Andrea. Soon after, California law enforcement caught up with the perpetrator and arrested him. After he called 911 and said he was wanted for slaying, 34-year-old Edwin Enoch Lara was a campus safety officer at Central Oregon Community College and a resident of Bend, Oregon. On November 16, 2016, a federal grand jury returned a 4-count indictment, charging Lara with 1 count each of kidnapping and carjacking, and 2 counts of using, carrying, and brandishing a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. In January 2018, prior to his sentencing, Lara pleaded guilty to the kidnapping and carjacking charges. He was then sentenced to life in federal prison. In April 2019, Lara received a second life sentence for terrorizing Andrea when he carjacked and abducted her. She briefly addressed Lara in court. "You thought you stole my life from me, but I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I am a warrior. I am stronger than I have ever been, and you are going to rot where you belong." Billy J. Williams, U.S. Attorney for the District of Oregon, said Edwin Lara is a ruthless perpetrator who will rightfully spend the rest of his life in prison. There is simply no place in civil society for this type of horrific violence. I sincerely hope Lara's 2 life sentences will bring some measure of comfort to his victims and their families. Their courage and perseverance throughout Lara's lengthy state and federal cases are an inspiration to the entire law enforcement community. In July 2020, Central Oregon Community College has agreed to pay $2 million to the family of Kaylee, as he was on duty at the college. The family filed a federal lawsuit against the college in July 2017, arguing that Kaylee accepted a ride from Laura, believing he was a police officer she could trust. Instead, she became trapped in a patrol car equipped with a cage and doors that would not open from the inside. Julie Van Cleve, Kaylee's mother, said the family plans to use part of the settlement to continue KK's Readers, a program that provides books for kids in Head Start and early education programs. She said, "I am now able to rest my daughter in peace, and everybody who has been responsible for this horrific crime has been held accountable. I can mourn Kaylee, my daughter, and not Kaylee Sawyer, the slaying victim." Since Kaylee's end, the state has passed Kaylee's Law, legislation protecting students and citizens by clearly defining the role of campus public safety employees. Laura, in an orange-striped jail suit, said, "I am sorry for what happened. I wish I could have stopped it. I do not know what happened. I was never this kind of guy." Two 26-year-old women faced a tragic Halloween night in 2004 in their Napa Valley residence. The family of the perpetrator would bring the resolution to this case. In the early 2000s, Leslie Ann Mazzara and Adriane Insogna moved to Napa Valley, California, after deciding to focus on their careers. Leslie was a former beauty queen who had just gone through a breakup and wanted to focus on her career in peace and quiet. She had been offered a job as a greeter for a winery run by the director of The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola. Adriane Insogna had lived in Calistoga, just about 45 minutes north of Napa Valley. She had completed her bachelor's degree in civil engineering at the California Polytechnic State University and worked at the Napa Sanitation District as an assistant engineer. The two 26-year-olds lived a quiet, low-profile life, and so did their third roommate, 27-year-old Lauren Mianza, who lived on the second floor. On Halloween night in 2004, in the suburban neighborhood on Dorset Street in Napa Valley, a tragedy took place. The girls gave out candy to resident trick-or-treaters all evening, until 11 p.m., when they turned off all the lights and went to sleep. But at 2 a.m., all three were woken by a loud sound. It sounded like shattered glass all over the lower level of the home, followed by blood-curdling screams and heavy footsteps throughout the home. Terrified when the footsteps started to grow louder, Lauren sneakily ducked out the back door and hid in the yard. Once she heard someone climbing out of the basement window and running off the property, she began to make her way into the home and around the staircase toward the rooms she had heard the screaming from. She could not believe what was in front of her. Face down in a pool of blood, roughly 2 inches deep, lay her roommate and former beauty queen, Leslie Mazzara. Towards the back of the bed, crouched, was Adriane Insogna, barely alive and bleeding heavily near her end. Lauren, mortified by what she had seen, gasped and slipped on the blood as she frantically tried to make her way to get her phone and dial 911. The detectives immediately started their investigation. They scoured the crime scene, collecting 266 items of potential evidence, from microscopic fibers to cigarette butts. They spent months going through every suspect relating to the girls' former and current boyfriends, and for 3 beautiful, attractive young bachelorettes, the list alone was long enough. After 11 months and many failed suspect DNA samplings, the police uncovered a piece of evidence strong enough to link the case with another suspect. Cigarette butts had been found around the perimeter of the residence. This piece of evidence was later disclosed publicly, and not even 3 days later, a young local man, with some association with the ladies, had written to his parents that he had been planning to end his life. He did not follow through with it, as the family convinced him to turn himself in to the police instead. Eric Koppel, then 26 years old, confessed to ending the life of both girls and was promptly arrested by the Napa police. Koppels had no criminal record at the time, and he was described as a sweet, gentler man who was publicly adorned by his wife, even on the stand during his trial. He was a local Napa Valley resident, married to Adriane's best friend, Lily Prudhomme. Months after taking the life of the 2 women, he invited Adriane's mother to read from the Bible in the memory of her slain daughter at his wedding. Adriane's mother said, "The burning question, why? What caused him to lose control and commit these horrible slayings? I never felt that he was dangerous. I never felt any kind of a negative, dangerous, sinister vibe from him at all. The exact motive has yet to be determined to this day. Even if it was an issue he had with his wife's friend, why take her life so brutally, and Leslie's? And why try to come after Lauren next?" According to the detectives, the possible motives could be that Koppel was resentful and possessive over any and all relationships that Lily had that may take time away from him. Koppel said that he had a recollection of leaving his home with the knife that night, but no memory of entering the home and what transpired afterward, effectively claiming he had blacked out. It is hard to believe that Koppel blacked out, considering he had burned his clothes and shoes that same night. He very likely knew what he was doing and the consequences of his actions. At 26 years old, the Napa Valley perpetrator, Eric Koppel, was convicted of 2 life sentences with no possibility of parole. He currently serves time at the Pleasant Valley State Prison in Coalinga, California. Lauren said she keeps a spiritual connection with her deceased roommates. "The girls added something to my life. I will never forget that. It is just having that chunk gone is hard to fill." In 2014, a man, working for his abusive father, would one day finally have enough and end his father's life in his home in London. 45-year-old David West Jr. worked for his father, David West Sr., from the age of 14 and played a pivotal role in the family business's success. On December 12, 2014, David Jr. stabbed his 70-year-old alcoholic father to his end, as he was slumped drunk at the bottom of the stairs at his home in Piccadilly, central London, England. Despite his playboy image, behind the scenes, David Sr. had a short temper and lived by a code of my money, my rules. Staff nicknamed him Papa Bear for his violent temper, and his son bore the brunt of the verbal abuse. The self-styled Lord David West of Hollisley made his fortune from the booze cruise trade in Belgium and France in the 1980s before moving to the West End, where he bought up lap dancing clubs, restaurants, nightclubs, and bars, including Puss in Boots and Abracadabra. David Jr., the oldest of 3 children, had tried to break away from his father's influence, but returned to help as the tycoon's health and business were failing. On the day of the slaying, he quit his £500-a-week job during a blazing row at the Abracadabra bar and restaurant in Piccadilly. The business was in financial trouble, which was the cause of some tension between the 2 men. David Jr., who lived in a flat his father provided above the bar, armed himself with a kitchen knife, went next door to his father's, and stabbed him in the neck and chest. Afterwards, he dialed 999 and told the police, "I would like to admit to a slaying. I have just ended my father's life." David Jr. accepted the slaying, but said he could not remember doing it or telling the police afterwards that he finally had the guts to stand up to him, and that he was glad he was deceased. An Old Bailey jury failed to reach a verdict on a slaying charge early 2015, but on November 9th, David Jr. pleaded guilty to manslaughter by reason of loss of control. At the time, David Jr. was also embroiled in a turbulent relationship with singer Victoria Lockwood, who was living in Felixstowe. During an argument by text message, he told her, "A lot of people need sorting out and it is going to be tonight," adding that he was planning to go out with a bang. His ex-girlfriend, Oksana Stansioni, who is also David Sr.'s personal assistant, witnessed father and son rowing in Abracadabra, and even recorded some of the defendant's foul-mouthed tirade on her mobile phone. Recalling the argument, Oksana said, "He said, 'I wish you were deceased. I hate you. You are a horrible, horrible man, and I think if you passed away, it would do a lot of people a favor. I do not want to work for you anymore.' There was a lot of swearing." As she helped the visibly upset victim stumble home, he confided, "This is my son. It is a shame. If I could, I would have hit him." Passing sentence, the Recorder of London, Nicholas Hilliard QC, said, "It was clear that you suffered verbal abuse and verbal aggression from your father for many years. Hilliard said that the staff had described him as his father's whipping boy, and his treatment amounted to psychological bullying. The judge, however, said that at the time of his demise, David Sr. had been particularly vulnerable, and the evidence against the defendant was overwhelming. Earlier in mitigation, Orlando Pownell QC said there was a toxic relationship between father and son. Although in later years, David West Sr. was frail, he had an acerbic tongue that could reduce grown men to tears. He said that David Jr. had been treated with severe belittlement and contempt by his father for 30 years. He added that the victim's family might have been expected to make statements on the impact of the slaying, but in this case, their grief was more for the defendant than the deceased. Pownell told the court that David Jr. was truly sorry for what he had done. He said, "It was a momentary aberration born of a life experience over many years." The court was told that the victim's family and David Sr.'s business partners had been against a trial from the start, but the Crown had decided it was right to bring the evidence before a jury. David Jr. has been jailed for 13.5 years. He became tearful as he told jurors that his father saw him as a failure, and that he was driven to stab him because of his constant bullying and belittlement. A possible street gang shooting led to a woman losing her life in April 2021 in Birmingham, Alabama. On Easter Sunday, on April 4th, 2021, gunfire erupted just after 7 p.m. at Patton Park in Birmingham, Alabama, while hundreds of people were gathered celebrating the holiday. 32-year-old Areyelle Yarbrough lost her life, and 5 other people, ages 5 to 21, were injured. Areyelle was a graduate of Alabama A&M University and was working on her MBA. She was a manager over 12 employees at the Jefferson County Department of Revenue, where she headed principal accounting for business and sale tax licensing. The officers arrived to find Areyelle laying on the ground just outside the passenger door of her vehicle, wounded by gunfire. She was pronounced deceased outside the vehicle, and those with her said that she was trying to protect some of the children who were with her. A witness said that 2 women were sitting on top of a blue Dodge Charger when someone opened fire, striking the Charger and the 2 women. The witness said that one of those women was shot in the chest. The witness said the other was Areyelle. Multiple people then started shooting. She estimated that about 100 shots were fired and said, "They did not even know what they were shooting at." The Birmingham Police Department and the FBI came together to help solve this case. In September 2023, 21-year-old Jalind Rashad Rayford was charged in the crime and taken into custody in Georgia by teams of law enforcement officers. He is only charged with ending Areyelle's life and not for injuring the others. But he is also indicted on an unrelated robbery of a woman that took place several weeks after the park shooting. Birmingham Police Chief Scott Thurmond had previously said that investigators believe members of the Birmingham street gang, H2K or Hard to Slay, were behind the dozens of bullets fired in the park that day. Areyelle's father, Pastor Michael Yarbrough, said, "Giving credit to God Almighty for his timing, I am grateful that we have closure now, and that the young man has been arrested, and we will watch the criminal system work and do its job." Rayford is out on bond, and a trial date has not yet been set.